Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. I want to speak to you guys about my greatest concerns. This is a very strange time in history. Going back to 1929, they had the Great Depression, and afterwards they released laws that came into effect that would stop us from having problems like that, called Glass-Steagall. That would keep the banking institutions in check. Right now, what they've done is there's certain things called underlying assets. Now, what I'm going to talk to you guys about right now is what keeps me up at night. I'm worried. Everybody should be worried. What they've basically done is there's underlying things of value in the world. Real things, tangible things you can put your hands on. And yes, real cash does have value. Even though people say, oh, the dollar's got no value. It does have value. If you got a big wad of $100 bills in your hand, a stack of them, it does have value. You can go out and purchase things with that. But it's real. You can actually hold those dollars in your hand, and the only counterparty risk associated with those is the fact that the United States government has said that they have value, and they backed them up with the power of the Treasury. But they do have value. They do exist in the real world. So I'm going to term those as physical money. Physical because it actually exists tangibly. Gold and silver is the same way. It's physical, the real physical gold and silver, the stuff you can actually hold in your hand, has value. It's a tangible asset. Oil, when it's like if you get massive field of oil and it's all in either the drums or it's in the big tanks, it has value. Products like produce and stuff, although they are subject to, like, if you've got a big field of tomatoes, it's not going to last very long, but while those tomatoes are in the real physical world, they have physical value. People's labor has real tangible value. These are real things. But what our financial system has done right now is it's created a whole, not just here in the United States and in Canada, and it's in every country on earth, China, everywhere. What they've done is they've created something from nothing. They've used derivatives, futures contracts, etc., etc. It just expands outwards so big, and it's so massive. And what they've actually done is they've taken these underlying products that have value, like a corporation, say, for instance, or gold or silver or even cryptocurrency. And yes, there is such a thing as real cryptocurrency. When you got the private key and it's on the blockchain, again, it's real. It's yours. It doesn't have any counterparty risk in it, and it's the real McCoy, just like real physical cash in your hand or a gold coin in your hand and so on. But what they're doing is they're expanding the value out of all of these things using derivatives and contracts, and it's like IOUs. And how they're expanding this value out is settlement in United States dollars. So if you've got something that is a product of a product of a product, in other words, there's an underlying asset there. It's like, say you've got GLD or SLV, or you've got a futures contract or whatever, you actually have that money as long as the system holds intact. That's a big if, as long as the system holds intact. You've got that associated value that they've created with settlement in dollars for these products. Now, I get word they're even doing this with cryptocurrencies. They're using Bitcoin, because that's the biggest one, as an underlying value, the real Bitcoins, the real coins, and they're creating all of this, they're extending it out, and they're doing settlement in the United States dollar. What they do when they create all of these wealth, I'm going to call them wealth, I'm going to just lump it all together and call it all wealth products or derivatives of the underlying assets. And right now the whole system has established this, and it's probably running somewhere about 100 to 1 for the real core assets out there that actually exist in the real world. There's 100 to 1 of these assets that have been generated off of these underlying assets that are connected to the underlying assets, but they're not real. It's all a paper fantasy, and it's all settled in dollars. So they've expanded out these pseudo assets, or assets that aren't real, that are connected with the United States dollar, and by doing so, they've expanded the monetary supply, but not in the physical form of cash. They've expanded it in the digital form of the dollar, which is basically connected to these underlying derivatives products. So these dollars only exist because the underlying asset exists, and the expanded amount of products, wealth products that they've created exists in fantasy only, and the dollars only exist because of the underlying products that they say the dollars are connected to. I know it gets so complicated, it's hard to understand, but they've done this to the point of about 100 to 1. So the underlying asset itself, say it's a gold coin, well, actually, using gold or silver as an example, they've probably have exceeded 100 to 1. It's probably more like 1,000 to 1. So all of this expansion of the money base, that's basically what it amounts to. And so if you can't connect that, or connect the dots, or if one link is missing in the chain that connects this overlay of the system, it all could evaporate down to the basic underlying assets that all these things are connected to. In other words, a derivatives meltdown, a rehypothecation meltdown, a meltdown of the entire system, and what's left would be the real underlying assets that everything has been connected to. It would be a sudden drying up of wealth. So the wealth effect would suddenly disappear in a sharp drawback to reality, and all of these people, like using silver for an example, because it's probably one of the worst case examples of this out there. I think it's about 700 to 1. So for every ounce of real silver we have out there, we've got 700 owners in the system that says that they own that ounce of silver. So if all of that disappears, all that's left is that real ounce of silver, using this as a case example. And they're all going to come running to try to make claim on it. But the real owner is the guy who has it in his hand, because possession is 9 points of the law. This is the world we live in. But when that happens, then all of that associated wealth suddenly evaporates, and you're left with the real tangible underlying assets. Now, this is what frightens me, is that in order to keep all of this going, this enormous bubble of wealth, and this is yet another bubble to all of the overinflated bubbles that they've generated within the system. In order to keep it going, they have to keep pumping more liquidity into the system. This is what the whole repo thing is all really about. It's probably going to certain institutions that are in trouble right now. They're not going to tell you. They've put a law in place that they don't have to tell. They can remain zipped for 2 more years before they tell us where that money's going. And they're increasing the operations. I think there's already a rip or a tear in the system in the bubble of the system that we have right now. I think there's already a rip or tear and the air's leaking out, and they're pumping more air in to keep it from popping. Now we're going into a quiet time of the year, Christmas, leading into New Year's. And why it's quiet is everybody starts to, around Christmas time, some of them take early leave and everything. Everything basically just goes on hold through Christmas. And we're getting so close now that it's getting ready to start to go on hold. The system probably going to go on hold right into the new year. Now, what worries me is in the new year, already we're seeing factory production slowing in the United States. We're seeing growth slowing in the United States. And we're seeing the worst of all, which is consumers are getting tapped out. I can't see what's going to happen during this Christmas season and retail sales and stuff like that yet, because it hasn't happened yet. But my assumption is that we're going to have a very poor Christmas season. In fact, unless people are willing to, and they probably are willing, to put even more on their credit cards. In other words, their credit cards are already probably bloated with debt. Maybe extend themselves a little bit more credit yet, in which case people are paying like exorbitantly high credit card fees on the money outstanding balance. Meanwhile, the people that are in the money pool are getting money for free or even less than free, which is totally not fair, because that's how the system is making money now, is on the backs of the middle class. Unless these consumers are willing to take out more debt, extend themselves even further deeper into debt, and I think at this point in time, the consumer out there is getting to the point where he's like, gee, instead of buying that new color television for Christmas for my wife, I think I'm going to go out and get her a box of candies and a bouquet of roses. Instead of spending the big bucks. And I think that's where we're headed. We're headed to a conservative Christmas, where people conserve and they try not to spend too much, try not to put too much more on their credit cards. So I think we're going to have an abysmal Christmas as far as spending is concerned. I think consumer confidence is going to start to really fall off really sharply. And I think as we move into January, we're going to start getting very bad economic news from China, but also from the United States. We've had a market drop-off, a huge drop-off in the GDP numbers coming out of the United States. And then we got Germany to think about. Italy is heading toward a banking crisis right now. It's starting. People are getting nervous, starting to withdraw their money out of the Italian banks. The Italian economy is just abysmal, and they have to try to abide by the laws set by the European Union, and not spend too much. Be thrifty. But the more thrifty they are, the more their economy sinks. Germany is going into a recession right now, and I think when the first quarter numbers come out, and I'm going to tell you what, I think the United States of America, when the numbers come out for this quarter that's ending right now, I think we're going to be in the negative. And I think one more quarter, January, February, March, when the numbers come in for the first quarter, I think we're going to be in a technical recession in the United States. I think we're going to be they're going to have their 2 quarters of negative GDP. This is where I think we're going with this. And so I'm expecting the real trouble to hit when these numbers start to come in. I think as these numbers start to come into the new year, we're going to see a major downturn in the entire world's economy. And what worries me is, and this is what keeps me up at night, is this next contraction. If these wealth products that I was explaining earlier start to actually all contract, well, they're all interconnected together. And suddenly, all of this money that has been created from reapothification or deriving their value from an underlying asset can suddenly all disappear like smoke blowing away in a wind. You know what I mean? And it's all gone. It just disappears, it evaporates. And if that happens too quickly, and if the world central banks start to lose control of this, which there's no guarantee that's not what will happen, because back in 2008, when this similar situation happened, they said they were only about 2 hours away from the whole thing starting to melt down. This time, we've generated a situation where this wealth effect that's created from all of these derivatives products ever expanding outwards is much bigger than it was back in 2008. This can create a depression that would exceed what happened in 1929, so it would be a greater depression than the 1929 depression. And this is the things that keeps me up at night, because then the only assets of value, as the system melts down, it creates a complex mathematical calculation. In other words, my assets suddenly are valueless. So now your assets that were connected to my assets that are valueless are now valueless. And then that next guy, he has to say to the people whose assets are connected to his assets that now your assets are valueless too. And they go around in a daisy chain like that, all telling each other, hey, you know what, our assets are all valueless now. What really does have value? Well, isn't there something underneath all of this that supports the value of what we have? Oh, yes, there is, but Joe owns it. He's got it in his head. It was a bar of gold. He's the guy that really has it. But all of our assets were all connected. We all own that, but on paper. And he says, well, tough luck, guys. I got the real thing. You got nothing. This is when the music ends. You know, and I mean, what happens is this is called deflation. The system basically deflates. And the only people that have any money left are the people that have real money that you can hold in the real world, not on either a slip of paper or on your computer screen. So if you go on your computer screen, you check your bank account, see how much money's in there. What you're seeing is digits on your computer screen. You leave there, and you go into your video game that you like to play, and you see the same thing. It says you've got so much gold or whatever on the video game. There's no difference, guys. It's the same thing. It can, and that wealth is only as good as when your computer's switched on. One of the things that worries me is if all this gets away from the central banks and actually starts to melt down, it could shut everything down. Because everything runs on money. It has the potential. If the central banks lose control over it, and it all starts to melt down to its basic underlying asset classes that actually support it all, then the wealth that so-called existed doesn't exist anymore, and the value of these underlying assets of what they can purchase goes up to the equivalent of what all of that fake wealth could purchase earlier. I don't know if I'm kind of explaining this right, but it's like a wealth transfer. In other words, right now, all of the wealth in the world out there is all being expanded out with these artificial products. If all of those artificial products suddenly melt down and disappear, poof, gone, then the value that was represented in all of those products out there is going to be transferred over into what's really real. that was the underlying product originally to begin with that created all of these massive amount of wealth products that exist. And so it'd be a transfer. So, in other words, what I'm saying is taking silver for an example. If there's 700 times for every 1 ounce of silver that actually is real and actually exists, if they've created derivatives products equal to 700 times, and all those people that have those derivatives products, they are laying claim to that 1 ounce of silver, and if all those derivatives products melt down to where they're not worth nothing, so the paper that they hold in their hands is valueless, then that real ounce of silver takes on the significance of the 700 times that they have rehypothecated it in the system through these wealth products. It all transfers that value over to the real underlying asset. That means that silver could go up its purchasing power, not its dollar value, but its purchasing power could go up 700 times. In other words, what you can purchase right now, basically with an ounce of silver, you can only purchase a hamburger. That's what they got it down to now. You purchase a hamburger with it, fries and a drink. Hamburger, fries, and drink for an ounce of silver. That's basically what they've got it down to. So one meal. Well, all the way through history, 1/10 of an ounce of silver would buy a man's labor for a day, which was a 12-hour day. So 12 hours of labor. That's 1/10 of an ounce. So a full ounce would be 120 hours. What they've got it down to now, boiling it down, they've got it down so you can work 1 hour and make an ounce of silver if you've got a good job. This is ridiculous. But how they've done it is by creating all these wealth products that are associated with that 1 ounce of silver. They've making it seem like there's 700 times more silver on Earth than what there actually is. Now they're doing the same thing with crypto. I heard that in the silver version of crypto, which is litecoin, that in one day they trade as much as all of the underlying asset class has in one day. So their trading in one day is equal to all of the asset class in existence, all the litecoin in existence that's been mined up until this day. They trade that much like in one day. So what they're doing is the same thing. They're starting to work the same way because they do the same thing with silver, real silver. Like on the COMEX, they'll trade in one day the equivalent of a year's mining supply. It's just like, it's ridiculous what they're doing. And if all of this melts down, not only would it create a wealth transfer, but what really frightens me is a system-wide shutdown of the financial system. And that could affect businesses, banks that are connected to these businesses. What really frightens me is like trucking businesses. They have to make payroll. And they rely on the bank to make payroll. Well, what if their bank goes down with this? Well, suddenly you lose a trucking firm because they can't make payroll and their workers just go home. Suddenly you got no delivery of food. These are the things that keep me up at night, guys. And we've went all hog for a system that has interdependencies within the system. Like, there's links within links within links. Like, going back into the 1800s, a lot of small farms dotted the landscape, and they'd only go into town once a month to buy sugar, and maybe buy a little bit of necessities that they really needed that they couldn't produce on the farm. But, like sugar and salt and things like that. And they would whatever they got something packaged in. If there's paper, they'd save the paper, and if there's string, they'd save the string or twine. And if they got a tin can of beans, they'd save the tin can and use it for something at the farm. And they had farms dotting the landscape everywhere, and they weren't relying on fuel, because oftentimes a farm would use a horse or a pair of oxen or whatever to pull the plow, and they had a big barn full of hay to feed their animals, and they were completely self-sufficient. And this was something that was the average across America, this self-sufficiency. So if the power went out, they didn't even know it was out, because they didn't have power to begin with. The internet's down. Well, the internet doesn't exist. They just worked off the soil, and they created everything they needed in their life, and they're completely self-sufficient. Nowadays, what we've created is an entire system that's structured with interdependent layers. Now, even the stores, if the power's out, they can't open because they got no windows. The cash registers won't work unless the internet's online. We've created this system that's structured in a way that it's like a setup for failure, ultimate failure. And a lot of people out there know it. And it's all interconnected to the financial system. If the financial system locks up, everything's in trouble unless they can get it unlocked. And this is one of the things that worries me, is if all these wealth products that they've generated outwards, all settlement in dollars, all of a sudden deteriorate or flip, just like the repo market flipped, but it might be so much bigger that the Fed might not be able to handle it all. Heck, the computers might not even be able to handle it all because of the mathematical calculations of this derivative pops, and then it affects 10 more derivatives down the chain, makes them pop, and then those 10 expand out and affect 100 more, which makes them pop, and then they go out and affect 1,000 more, which makes them pop, and then those 1,000 affect 100,000 more, which makes those pop, and the next thing you know, the mathematical calculation, would our computers even be able to handle it? Or would our computers all just freeze up if we tried to unwind the mathematical calculation of all of the derivative chains, just basically pop through the system? It might just basically freeze the financial system so that nobody even knows who owns what. The whole thing just might freeze and no way to unlock it, because it might be too big of a mathematical calculation for our computers even to handle. They've rehypothecated so many different assets and created so many different types of derivatives products and so many different types of money market products, and they've just went on and on and on with this. These are the things that keep me up at night. I'm worried that they've created and structured a failure within the system that could happen either next year or let's just say within the next 24 months. And how far reaching will this go when it all starts to go? Will it be a slow turnover that the system can handle? Or will it be a sudden sort of thing that happens within a matter of hours? What to expect? What really to expect? We got a lot of financial people within the financial system that say it is going to be a terrible bang, and other ones like myself who think it's going to be more of a slow thing where they try to control it, more of a soft landing rather than such a hard landing. But we all are in agreement it's coming. I guess we're going to find out, and in the not too distant future. And this is why I've been advising my viewers out there in my audience to clean out a closet in your house and put bottled water in there, a emergency medical kit, canned food, things like that. Store things away. Fill the closet right up with new stuff. And just shut the door and don't worry about it. Because if you need it, it's there. And you don't know. You might have some other kind of disaster that comes that you might have to use this for in the weather. Because the weather's going crazy too. You know? Climate is getting crazy. And nobody can deny that the climate's going crazy. I mean, we've had the craziest year here. I've never seen anything like it. I've got trapped in my house twice this year. You know? By the weather. Where my car just was basically frozen into the ground and you couldn't move it. Ice come out of the heavens. You know, and a layer 4 inches thick that you need, and it coated the car. I mean, with ice, and it was all the end of my driveway was 4 feet thick, a block of ice. I'm telling you guys, I'm not exaggerating. And I was stuck in my house for weeks, waiting for that big slab of ice to melt in the roads. You couldn't even walk on the side of the road. If I wanted to go up to the grocery store, I couldn't even go because I couldn't walk on the side of the road. It was ice, you know, and just the weather's gone crazy. So I had to eat oatmeal. Thank God I had the oatmeal. I had to eat oatmeal for like 2 weeks, you know, and stuck in my house. And I mean, you know, we're living in a world where if these people that's created these problems, you know, for us, they're leaving it on us, on our backs, the problems, to worry. It's not right. We shouldn't have to worry about our future. With all the amount of work that we've done over the years for them, to support them in their lofty ivory tower, they should make a stable environment where we feel safe and secure. This is their responsibility. Instead of creating a system that creates worry amongst us. Anyway, I'm rambling on a little bit. Thank you guys for listening to this show. Like and subscribe, and give me a thumbs up. We'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.